If everybody's ready, why don't we go ahead and get started? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the June 10th Des Moines City Council Workshop. Our first item on the agenda this morning is the Public Works and Engineering Departments, their status and operations for high water and flood preparation.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Pat Kazitsa, Interim Public Works Director. 20 years ago today, this city was in the grip of a major flood. That event changed forever the way we prepare for, resource for, and manage high water events. What we've learned since 1993 is that the key to protecting people and property is flood protection facilities. Joining me today in this presentation will be Dave Miller, our Sewer Enterprise Administrator, who will bring us up to date on the flood protection facilities we have in place. Also on this presentation team is City Engineer Jeb Brewer, who will share with us what more may need to be done. I'd like to begin this presentation with a recap of the high water event that we experienced following Memorial Day weekend and the heavy rains that weekend. In preparation for the flood season, we begin during the late winter months with preparing a 284-page flood manual. It tells us exactly how to button this city up step by step, inch by inch, in water levels on the rivers and streams. Then we meet with our employees in the upper right-hand corner there, March 27th, to go over the details of that. In the bottom left-hand corner, we're preparing our supplies, filling sandbags, all the while exercising the facilities that we have at Swingate there at City Hall. This is what we faced on May 28th by hydrograph. Some of these you've already seen, but we have predictions far above flood stage on both the Raccoon and the Des Moines rivers. This is what we received for rain on us at these river gauges, and then we also had it west of us in the Raccoon River Basin. Significant rain resulting in high water levels. Maybe a little hard to read here, but this shows us well above flood stage on the predictions on Fleur, and at Southeast 6th, we anticipated we may have to close Fleur at that time. This is what we saw on the ground. We're looking here now at George Flagg Parkway, Grays Lake, Center Street Dam, and Simon Estes Theater. These are some of the activities that we engaged in to address the high water conditions. Operational issues of barricading. We weld the intakes on Fleur Drive to give us another 6 inches if needed based on the forecast. Logging operations that you've heard about here to protect our facilities and to facilitate flow. And then pumping operations here at Southeast 4th and Shaw, the site of a permanent pump station now funded for construction. The current river levels, and this is current as of June 6th, you can see we're below flood stage throughout the city on both our rivers and our streams. And we have Saylorville dropping at a satisfactory rate here. So at this point, in short, we got past that high water event, but this is interesting, I think, from our state climatologist. So far in 2013, Iowa has broken a slew of weather records with more rainfall than during the major flood years of 93 and 2008. The forecast as we go forward, the best bet for the rest of the summer is more of the same, wetter than normal conditions. I can tell you as we look at our 15-day forecast now, next weekend we're looking at heavy rain again. And we say heavy rain as it approaches an inch or over an inch. We're looking at about an inch and over on Saturday and over ½ inch on Sunday. So we'll continue to monitor those conditions. At this point, I'll be followed by our Sewer Enterprise Administrator, Dave Miller, who will bring you up to date on the flood protection facilities we have in place.
Morning, as Pat indicated, I'm Dave Miller, Sewer Enterprise Administrator for the City of Des Moines Public Works Department. I'm going to cover a couple of the projects that we've been working on since 2008 and give you a quick update on their status. This is a list of them. We built several pump stations, a couple of levees. We've done some buyout in some flood hazard areas on the east side of Des Moines. There are a few WRA projects, and then we've had assistance from the Corps of Engineers on project. The Union Pacific's is paying to take out a bridge, and the DOT's doing some work. This is a photo of the Jackson Street pump station discharge operating. This is taken from Southeast 14th. This was a $5.8 million project that's now in service. Serves the south side of Des Moines from Watrous north to the river. This really gives us a lot more protection, and it reduces the amount of personnel required to set. We used to set 3 Crisafulli pumps that were tractor driven, and we had to keep those gassed up and running. So this facility really assists us in fighting a flood. This is the Court Avenue pump station on the west side of the Des Moines River. It's just south of Court Avenue. Doesn't look anything like any of the other pump stations we have in Des Moines. This probably has more architecture in it than any other facility I've ever worked on. This is a $13 million project total. $7 million was for the pump station, and the other 6 went into storm sewers that serve Court Avenue to 2nd Avenue, 2nd Avenue to Grand, and Grand to 3rd Street. And we've seen a great reduction in flooding during heavy rains with that new storm sewer, and we have used the pump station. Birdland Levee is a project that the Corps of Engineers assisted us with. They put in $5.2 million into this $7.8 million project. The city was able to get iJobs funds for $2.1 million, and so our share ended up only being $500,000 for this facility. It includes recreation facilities on top of it. Central Place Levee is also built by the Corps. They've just completed this. Its cost was $7.8 million. 5.2 was federal funds, and this levee and Birdland Levee were being certified by the Corps of Engineers. They were going through that process. Due to sequester, they no longer have funds to continue that operation, so we're going to keep pushing the Corps to find those funds to get these 2 levees certified. We see that as critical to being able to get better flood insurance for the property owners that are protected by these levees. This is a map showing the eastern part of the city of Des Moines. The north is to the right on this map. It shows 4 Mile Creek, and the 2 blue lines are the flood boundary for the 1% reoccurrence storm. Inside that, hard to see, there's a red line, which is the floodway. But since 2008, we've bought 188 homes in this area. There are still 230 structures at risk, so we've got a long ways to go to get this corridor cleared. We've spent, I think, $12 million so far on those 188 homes. This is a project being built by the WRA. It's called the New Main Outfall. It's a 12-foot diameter pipe. You can see a couple of the 8-foot sticks of pipe in the picture. This is at Southeast 6th. This project is 3.5 miles long. It's a total of $88 million worth of work. 46 million of it is in the piping, and the other 42 million is in a facility at the treatment plant to pump and treat the combined sewer flows. This is a river crossing before the river came up. The contractor is trying to get the sewer across the river at this point. This is to be completed by December, but with the river where it is now, this project may be delayed. We'll be able to start up the facility and take the flows from the east side until this is completed, but it may be a while longer before we get the west side of the river served by this sewer. This is a project being built out close to 63rd and Winona, close to Valley Junction. This project is a pump station that pumps flow to Norwalk through a 72-inch force main. At Norwalk, there is a 450 million gallon storage lagoon that we will be able to pump this flow, take the peak flows off of the sewer system between this point and the wastewater treatment plant, store it down by Norwalk, and bring it back around the system off peak and treat it at the wastewater treatment plant. This reduces the surcharging on the sewer that causes backwater into basements on Hartford Avenue, and it should reduce the surcharging we have at the treatment plant. This is a photo of that pump station under construction during that May storm event we had. The Corps of Engineers has been working on the levee wall system since 2008. This is a photo of the wall south of Court Avenue. In the background, you can see a gate structure. These are critical to our operating these levees efficiently. We can close that gate structure in half an hour and have that sealed up. The Union Pacific has been taking out the bridge south of Scott Avenue. They have 4 sections out and there's 1 section left. Once they get the sections out, the piers will be taken out, so that will reduce the obstruction on the Des Moines River due to this bridge. The DOT has been working on building some new bridges across or on US Highway 65. US Highway 65 was built to an old flood standard from the early 90s, and new flow calculations have indicated there isn't enough open space in those bridges. So they're under construction with the first set of bridges. On the northbound lanes, they're building 2 sets of bridges, and next summer they will build the southbound bridges. The northbound bridges should be completed by fall, and then again, next summer they will be building those southbound bridges. Not only do we have issues in wet weather with storm sewers, we also have issues with the sanitary sewer conveyance system. We have 2 programs that we have been focusing on since 2008. One is the private property protection program, and the other is our sewer linings program. On the sewer lining program, we've pushed 3 major components of that. We got federal grants to do lining in the Highland Hills area, which is shown at the very bottom of the map in sort of a pink color. We got $3.5 million in grant from CBDG to do the red lines. And then with our own funds, we've been doing the ones in blue, such as East Grand Avenue and downtown on Walnut Street. And in the private property protection program, we've done almost 3,000 reimbursements to property owners to put in backwater valves or sump pumps. That's cost over $2.8 million. We've seen a great reduction in sewer backups due to this program. I think we can fairly directly contribute to this, because areas where we would have had backups in a wet year like this, we have not this year. So that concludes my portion, and Jeb Brewer will be taking the next section.
Dave,
Yes.
could you go back and, I didn't want to interrupt the presentation, but on the Winona project that goes to Norwalk, the southwest,
Yes.
can you give me more specifics about the timeline for that? And because there have been some issues, I know Pat's helped me deal with some of the issues down there with you on the water that's being pooled down there by
Yes.
the bales or the,
The straw bales have been removed, and they've been spraying mosquitoes to keep that from being an issue. Nick Carter with our WRA section has been working with the neighborhood leader on that.
okay, and so what's the timeline for this project being done then?
It will be completed, we think, by August of 2014. So we've got 1 more spring to go.
Okay, so will they go back and have to
They'll regrade and seed everything to get it to flow the way it's supposed to.
okay.
Dave, on those Highway 65 bridges, is that going to take some of that farmland out of use? Are they buying up that land so the river goes on through there then?
Well, the agreement is that the DOT would build the bridges, and the city of Des Moines would come in and open up a corridor to get water to pass through those bridges better. So we're developing the scope of that consulting agreement to start the process of designing that conveyance system. So we haven't identified the properties yet that we'll need to take.
Okay, thank you.
Morning, Mayor, members of council, Jeb Brewer, city engineer. As Dave just walked through those slides in a few minutes, it makes you think that those aren't maybe significant improvements, but they really represent a lot of money, a lot of effort, really I think success from the mayor and council in advocating for grant funds, and those projects are in place since the floods of 2008. And even though this last event wasn't really on the scale of 2008, those improvements did have an impact on our ability to fight the flood. Dave already mentioned at Jackson Street the ability to have city crews work on other projects and address other needs in neighborhood flooding because they're not having to man pumps. There are other things that may not be as obvious. Since we had the improved levees at Central Place and Birdland, then we're not as concerned about those levees. As you know, in 2008, Birdland did fail, and we were always conscious of those levees being a weak spot in our line of protection. But with the strengthened levees, we're able to tell the Corps of Engineers, Pat, during this last flood event, told the Corps of Engineers that they could do a deviation, meaning that they could let more water out of Saylorville earlier. And how that helps us is it lets Saylorville get down to a lower level sooner. We want to keep as much capacity to store any future rains up there. The problem is when Saylorville gets full, then there's no control, and then we're sort of at the mercy of the rains. And so all those improvements, they start adding up and create a more robust and effective flood fighting system. Want to go a little bit, even though we've made tremendous improvements in the last 5 years, and even before that, since '93, we've put in a lot of improvements in the city of Des Moines as far as flood protection. There's always more to do. As council knows, the Corps of Engineers came out with a new study about the flood flow frequencies on the Des Moines River. And part of that study looked at what would be the future of flooding. We're seeing more rain and rain that occurs in a pattern that has more impact upon the river system than in the past. And that study tells us that we have more work to do, specifically in the freeboard on our current levee system. Just a definition for those who may be watching, freeboard is a term used for levees. It's the additional 3 feet of the top of the levees that we build as sort of an added insurance for where we put the flood protection for the levees. And that's important that we maintain that 3 foot. It's important for a couple of reasons. The protection, but it's that we receive that 3 feet, but also it's important in the regulatory sense for us to get it certified through FEMA. And we've previously presented to council sort of a plan of attack of some things that we wanted to look at as far as improvements to our flood system to address those issues with the flood flow frequency. 2 of those projects that we had brought forward to you are underway. That's the UPR bridge, which is being demolished, although rather slow, kind of slow motion, but it is being demolished. And a US 65 bridge work, which is being funded through the DOT. I think that represents about $17 million of effort that the DOT is doing to open up that corridor on US 65, which significantly impacted us in 2008. Now I just want to talk about some of these other improvements that we had mentioned before, where we are and where we need to go from here. Was the question before was about once the DOT opens up those bridges, what's the impact to the surrounding farmlands? We've had some preliminary discussions with the Ag Drainage District 9 down there. To date, we really can't give them any definitive answers about what property rights or interest would need to be obtained. Much of this property down there already has a U.S. Corps of Engineers flooding easement. This area does flood due to backing up water from Red Rock Dam. However, we do need to make some additional improvements down there to really complement the work that the DOT is doing down there to allow high water events to get over to those bypass flow bridges that the DOT is building, and that will have a significant impact on the flood levels upstream from there. Again, we haven't designed that. We've had some preliminary discussions, and I'll get a little more into some of the issues that we've run into with the Corps regarding the work that we want to do. This is just sort of a review of some of the projects that we had previously discussed. As Dave mentioned, we have recently upgraded the flood wall system in downtown. The design and construction of those flood wall systems was really built upon a previous set of flood flow frequency. In our early analysis, we had focused on trying to make improvements to the conveyance of the river system and not have to touch the flood walls, because we had identified that there were areas in which that freeboard didn't make the full 3 feet. However, as we've gotten into the analysis, it appears that there will not, it's not going to be possible to make enough conveyance improvements to not touch the flood walls, which means at the end of the day, we're going to have to put up some system of tip-up panels on the top of those flood walls. That creates a whole other set of issues that we need to deal with, and will impact some of our planning for some other projects, which I'll get into in a few minutes. Not only the downtown wall flood wall system, which we have, we also have the earthen levees. We call these levee systems here shown on the map DM1 and DM3. We had identified on those needs to do some minor levees, raises on the earthen levees, and also, in addition, to do some channel improvements to complement the work of the UPER, taking out their railroad bridge, opening that up and improving the conveyance. We had worked with the Corps of Engineers on trying to make some improvements to DM3 under a minor 408 project, and that's what we'd been working on last year. Unfortunately, as we've gone through that process, the Corps has refined their process, and in that working with them, we're going to have to go through a major 408 review process, which again I'll talk about at the end of my presentation, because it's a significant impact to us on what we can do with our levee system, since even though they're owned and operated by the City of Des Moines, in order to do any work, we have to follow and comply with all Corps of Engineers regulations. As we move further down the stream, not all the levees that protect Des Moines are owned by the City of Des Moines. There is a levee down here in the southeast part of Des Moines called the Southeast Des Moines Levee, and that levee is actually owned by the Corps of Engineers, and it was built as part of the Red Rock remedial works. We've identified that there needs to be some additional levee raises there. One of the main issues with that particular levee is, since we don't own it, any work on that would have to go through not only a Corps approval process, but a Corps funding process. And as we've found out, that's very difficult to get through, because of the federal funds are becoming scarce, and also the length of time. For example, we did make improvements to Birdland and Central Place through that Corps process. However, we started that after the '93 flood, and unfortunately, it wasn't in place until after the 2008 flood. It takes many, many years to go through that process, and that's going to be a challenge for us. We had done a feasibility study on the raising of we call it the Red Bridge, the Des Moines Union Railroad Bridge. We had completed that feasibility and found out that it really was economically and technically feasible to raise the bridge up in height instead of remove the bridge for the flood constrictions. But as I'd mentioned before, we were looking at conveyance improvements on the river and hoping not to touch the walls. Our analysis shows us that if we're going to have to put up tip-up panels on the walls, it may be more cost-effective to make those tip-up panels as high as we can with the structural integrity of the wall, which would be somewhere between about 1.5 and 2 feet of tip-up walls. At that point, we may not need to raise the Red Bridge at this point, and we may be able to restore our freeboard requirements through these tip-up panels. So it'd be more cost-effective, and the whole reach to invest our money in the tip-up panels and not in the red bridge at this time. That doesn't mean in some point in the future, if there are changes to our flood flow frequency, that we would have to address the bridge, but we've been kind of looking at the global thing and seeing where we can get the most bang for our buck. That kind of brings me to the point that I wanted to spend the most time on, and there's some technical aspects. We throw this term around 408, and it's really just a reference to the Corps of Engineers approval process before you can do any work to the levees. As I mentioned before, we had started, and our hope was to be able to do some of those earthen levee improvements through a minor 408 process in which the requirements and analysis and all of the things that you need to do are much less, and the time frame is less, the expense is less. We started that process on the DM3 levee. We were unable to accomplish that, and as we had the discussions with the Corps, we needed to go back and said, we need to do the major 408 process. The thing is Rock Island District hasn't ever gone through a major 408 process. There are very few places that have done that. It's really a national issue. In fact, there's a coalition of communities that are working to try to address this and to make sure that while we need to look at the requirements to make sure the improvements are done in a safe manner, that there are not restrictions that unduly prevent us from making physical improvements to provide protection to the community. We've worked with our Holland and Knight. They've helped us make contact with this coalition, and even now there's some legislation which may help relieve some of those requirements for local communities regarding the 408. Again, the FEMA criteria is, we call it section, if you hear, 6510. That is the process of getting the levees accredited for the flood insurance program. Now, you would think that these programs would interface a little bit better than they do, but they're separate agencies, they have separate requirements, and as we've been going through this process, we're actually trying to do an analysis that the FEMA and Corps are doing at a national level, which is trying to look at how do these two separate processes interrelate, because you could go through a Section 408 process and at the end of it be 100% compliant with the Corps, but then not meet all the requirements for FEMA. Likewise, you could meet all the FEMA requirements and not meet all the Corps requirements. And so it comes upon us to look at our levee system and try to find out how to satisfy both of those requirements at the same time. We've already identified those deficiencies, but now we have to start the process of satisfying those both agencies. If we look at what one of our major goals, obviously, is to provide additional flood protection to the community, but it's also to be eligible for accreditation through the FEMA process. Now, the FEMA process and the flood insurance program is under review, and there are a lot of changes that are occurring right now in that process. We were originally scheduled to have new maps come out which would incorporate some of these changes to the river flow. In their discussions with FEMA, even though these are their current dates, fiscal year 15 for preliminary maps and fiscal year 17 for regulatory maps, our conversations with them is these dates will be pushed back. A number of reasons for that. One is that they still are trying to determine what processes they're going to follow on a national level, and specifically how that would apply to Des Moines, but also their funding. The project essentially has to be restarted for us in here in Des Moines for our mapping system. So we don't know when those dates are. That's not necessarily a bad thing for us, because that gives us more time for us to try to get these improvements in place before the new maps come out. This slide just sort of highlights some of the efforts that we've been doing to try to address, like the 408 and even some of the FEMA requirements. The city this last year's had a Holland and Knight assistance. Holland and Knight is a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. Many of these issues are not only the physical requirements for the levees, but also legislative and regulatory in nature. And they've been able to help us to access administration functional experts, people who've worked in there in the Corps and FEMA, They've helped us, got us in contact with this national coalition. In fact, there's another meeting just this week to discuss some of the 408 impacts. We've been focusing a lot previously on crediting language for work and the 408 issues with the Corps. There's been some headway made. However, a lot of these processes take time, and we are continuing on a process to try to comply with the current rules and regulations to get our projects moved forward, while at the same time seeing if there can be relief through a legislative process. Want to review a little bit just some of the contract work that's been done to date, and that kind of sets us up to talk about where we need to go in the future. As I mentioned, we had started the DM3 levy. We did some preliminary design, did a submittal to the Corps of Engineers, started that review process under a minor 408. We were not successful. However, in that we were able to learn a lot about the Corps, and the Corps was able to really formulate in their minds and communicate back to us what are the requirements are going to be for us. It's difficult for them since they haven't gone through it before. You really don't like to be the one that they learn on, but we just have, that's the role that we'll be playing in this process. So completed that. HDR, there was a study done in conjunction with the WRA on a tieback levy on the DM1 Southeast Des Moines levy. As I mentioned, in the southeast part of Des Moines, that levy is actually owned by the Corps of Engineers. There was some thought, since we don't own it, if we were going to have difficulty making improvements, would it be more worthwhile for us to separate those levees by constructing a small tieback levee? The feasibility study, it really indicated that it would be better to, that would be so expensive for that tieback levee, you could probably take those funds and make the improvements on the Southeast Des Moines levee, and then you get protection for that area. Well, the tieback levee just simply separates the levees. So it really wasn't an economical option. So our strategy is to continue to work with the Corps and try to get them to do those improvements on the Southeast Des Moines levee. In addition, mentioned the feasibility study for the Red Bridge, where we could raise it, but we may want to delay that project when we get to the end of our hydraulic master plan. That brings us to our main hydraulic consultant that we have with Stantec, who is a national consultant who works with FEMA on these mapping issues and hydraulic studies and accreditation. We have already done the preliminary hydraulic analysis, and we've already gone through that minor 408. We've worked with the Corps and with FEMA to develop this set of compliance requirements. This 408, some of the things that will have to be done will be things like extensive geotech analysis, risk analysis, new seepage analysis, very intensive, man-hour intensive type of requirements that will be placed upon us. Essentially, we have to go back, take what the Corps built decades ago in a conceptual world, take that apart, look at each part, and try to determine how to bring it up to current standards before we can even make any improvements to it. Is going through that process. We don't know if there will be additional requirements placed upon us for facilities that are out there and tested and have worked. We were kind of the opinion that the levees have been there a long time, and we know that they're effective because they've had to withstand a number of high water events. But the regulations will require us to go back and do this work before we can get approval to do any of our improvements on the levee system. Unfortunately, there are no federal funds available to do this type of extensive analysis. That means it comes back on the city for us. We want to bring back to City Council here within the next month a package of services to do that analysis and requirement definition that we have to do with the Corps. Unfortunately, we're looking at the scope of services at about $1.5 million in order to do this. It's about our whole levee system. You have to go back and relook at what had been done decades ago. We would like to bring that back to council next month for your consideration, for us to move forward on that. If we don't do this work at this point, we can't do any improvements to our levee system without making this hurdle for the Corps of Engineers. So that kind of leaves us at the end. We started with the good news, which is we've done a lot of work since 2008. Our system is really in very good shape. We were very effective even this last moderate high water event in fighting it. As Dave mentioned, a lot of the problems we'd have seen a few years ago in an event like this, like basement backups, have moderated, and then we even are finishing some projects like the main fault sewer that will, in the next year or two, will make even more improvements. Even ones that don't seem as obvious. It always kind of astounds me that you do work over there in Winona and it helps flooding down in Hartford. This whole system is interrelated, and as you do work on one place, it has benefits in another area. However, the bad news is the improvements that we want to make in the future, we are running into some additional regulatory hurdles that we are going to have to overcome in order to make the physical improvements which we think are necessary to restore that extra freeboard to the levee system. So with that concludes our presentation.
So the regulatory hurdles, I know you've touched on some of them here, but is there anything that you haven't touched on?
With the Corps of Engineers.
Is it all with the Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, well, the Corps of Engineers is the first one you have to get through. The FEMA ones come at the end. However, what we did is we did what we call a gap analysis, is we don't want to go through the 408 and then get at the end of the 408 and say, darn it, we didn't meet this one for FEMA. So we're taking the FEMA requirements and in our design analysis, bringing them forward, even though in the process of doing the project, it comes at the end. But it's smarter to be able to do all the analysis up front so that when you actually do a project, you don't spend millions of dollars and you get at the end and say, well, it won't meet the accreditation. That gets difficult because the rules are constantly changing. On Monday, this is what we're going to do. And you get the work done by Friday. Well, Wednesday, they change the rules. So there will need to be a sense of flexibility as we go through this process and a constant monitoring and feedback through the FEMA system. And I think we've got that in place since Stantec is a FEMA consultant. They are really tied in with the rules and the rule processes as they change.
Mr. Manager, would you like to make a couple comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. As has been pointed out by Dave and Jeb and Pat, the City Council and the Mayor since really 1993 has made a whole series of improvements in our flood protection systems. You could call them strategic, almost surgical kind of improvements, and your flood protection is much better today than it's been in the past. There's just no question about that. You've done a really marvelous job in making those improvements. But there's really a significant change that's occurred in the last several years, and that is that I guess the way I would characterize it, there's sort of a federal gridlock on our ability to get federal assistance, whether it's technical assistance, although we get some of that, or financial assistance or regulatory assistance. It's become much more challenging to do that. And the default position is, because it's so difficult to get funding or regulatory assistance out of the federal process, the default is that you've had to assume a lot of those responsibilities. What Jeb just said to you is that the study that he has to do, which is essentially going back and looking at your levees that were built to core standard, and ask the question, are they still sufficient? Do they have structural integrity? Or are they going to stand up against a flood? So we basically can't get funds out of the federal government. You've got to appropriate your own dollars. And if we don't do that, then we're not able to make future improvements in the system. That's, if I remember the number, Jeb, $1.6 million. That's the consulting contract that will be on your agenda in a couple weeks, asking you to consider doing that. You really don't have a lot of choice if you want to continue to make the necessary improvements in your system, but it's kind of where we are. You ask why that's happened. It's a whole variety of things. Fewer federal dollars, sequestration effects, although I'll tell you this was happening well before sequestration ever occurred. Events like Katrina, which really changed the whole national mindset about flood protection and what cities have to do and how we're going to do it, made things much more challenging to go through the process and get approval. All of that's contributed to this system, which now makes it very difficult to get federal assistance to do these things. And again, the default is that responsibility falls back on local governments to do it. And you're seeing those effects here, and we'll continue to see those Unless you just want to turn your back on the improvements, which you haven't done for 20 years, I suspect that that would not happen here. We're at a very critical time. You've done great work in the flood protections that have been put in place really since 1993, but there's a lot more work to do. And just the last thing about our city staff, Jeb and Pat and Dave and all their staff in the room, these guys are absolutely top-notch. They know what they're doing. They've been very systematic. They've brought to you very cost-effective. Jeb kept talking about cost-effective improvements. That's their job. That's what they try to do, but they've done a really good job. I'm sure we'll continue to do that, working it in the future. This will continue to be a big issue for it. And the big picture is that it's so difficult to work the federal process. And that's one of the reasons Jeb mentioned that we've got H&K on board. They've been very helpful. And last thing I want to say is the mayor has been extraordinarily effective at opening doors in Washington to allow discussions to take place with both administration officials as well as the delegation that we have, to at least have discussion about some of these issues and get some forward movement. H&K has been great as well, but there's just a lot of work to do if we want to keep the city safe from floods. So thank you very much for allowing those comments, Mr. Mayor.
Rick, a question to you. Have you found the funding for us to hire that consultant?
Yes, there is funding in your capital improvement program in basically the stormwater and sanitary sewer enterprises that we have.
That's good, because it sounds like we're going to need that before we can go much farther forward.
You're right, Mr. Mahaffey. That's the process. You've got basically, previously the Corps might have done those studies. Now there's no funding for them to do it, and you've got to appropriate your own dollars to do it.
Anything else? Anybody? All right, Jeb, thank you. Although it looks like you're up again. We're going to get an update now from the engineering department, overview of our summer construction projects. Mr. Brewer.
Again, Mayor, members of council, Jeb Brewer, city engineer. You should find at your desk a folder that contains within it 2 of our construction updates. The first one that you'll find is our spring construction update. This is produced 3 times a year. It includes major construction projects throughout the city. You've got the copy that's just hot off the press for the spring. This document is also posted on our website for citizens to look at. It doesn't include all of our capital projects, just some of the ones that we think are larger and more impactful. If there are projects on there that you desire for us to keep on here, please let us know and we can add or even remove projects if you desire. Also in your packet is a document here, a yellow cover, and this is a street improvement maintenance program. Some of the projects are the same in here. This primarily looks at all our capital projects. As you know, the city, we do all sorts of capital projects. We have a diversity of city services that we provide, so we have to provide diversity of infrastructure from fire stations to libraries. This focuses strictly on street improvements. In addition, it also contains projects which are done by our city crews. Any street work that's going to be done this summer will be in this particular pamphlet here. And it does cross over when we mention a street project in our construction update. And again, this one is also on the website for people to look at during the summer. This one's produced once a year. This one's produced 3 times a year. Just a quick overview, as I mentioned, the City of Des Moines capital program is very diverse, because it's reflective of a diverse city who has many programs to meet its citizens' needs. Just if we look at some of the things in the last couple of years, excluding airport and WRA work, as Dave mentioned, the WRA is in a really massive capital improvements program. But if we extract those projects and look at which are those projects which are funded by what we kind of think of traditional city funding streams, which would be GO, grants, gaming funds, enterprise funds like sanitary storm, parking system. In the last 3 years, the City Council has awarded approximately 150 contracts totaling about $200 million. And of that $200 million, I think it's instructive to see that $88 million were state and federal grants of some form. So The city's been fairly successful, very successful in these last few years of accessing state and federal grants, and so we would like to continue to do that process. Of course, that can fluctuate depending on finances and the willingness of those other entities to make those grants available. What I like to do, I want to spend a lot of time going through all the projects, since you do have those documents. If you do have questions about a particular project, we can get back and provide more detailed information.
Grand Avenue Bridge, my favorite project.
I'm going to talk about that one.
Thank you.
That was
Okay.
one I was going to talk, because I knew that would be of much interest. I've got a few projects to talk about. We'll talk some about streets. I'll just go through them in kind of categories. Bridges will be a little bit later. We'll start with streets, since that's one of our major issues. Here's a picture of a recently completed portion of the Southeast Connector, which is a major capacity improvement project we have in the CIP. And I just want to highlight some of the projects that were currently underway for the Southeast Connector. The 9th to 15th, which was awarded earlier this year to Elder Corporation. That particular project, of the $7 million, about 4.8 are actually grant funds and 2.2 are city funds. The next one is really our big project, and that's the Southeast Connector from Southeast 15th to Southeast 30th. It's $31 million. It'll actually be presented to council tonight for your consideration of award. Of that $31 million, $19 million are from federal grants, which includes a Tiger grant, which is a nationally competitive grant. It was very difficult to get, and I think there is, as Rick will mention, I think we were successful because some of the work that the mayor and other people did and the rest of the council in Washington, D.C. for us to secure those funds. We also have $9 million of state RISE funds. RISE should be all capitalized, but like Tiger. But those funds were also there because of the work with Kemen and some of the improvements being made in conjunction with that construction. And then finally, $3 million of city funds. It is very unusual for a project of this size to have such a small amount of city funds. We're very fortunate. It's very unusual. One of the things, this will be a huge project, and because of the Tiger funds, it's going to have a lot of grant compliance. The Tiger just takes grant compliance administration up a notch, but we are preparing to comply with those grants. And one of the things that you have on tonight also is the construction administration services, which are necessary for us to order and access those grants. We have to make sure that we comply with those requirements. Indianola Avenue widening, that one is on tonight for setting the data hearing. I know that's a special interest to Councilman Meyer. This particular piece of the Indianola does include the signals at Easter Lake. So I know he's been asking about that for many years, and this is the project which will install those. That project does have about $3 million of STP funds on it. The construction won't be starting on the main road until next year. There will be some sewer and some other work that will be done later this summer in preparation for the disruptive work which will happen next year. We typically have we have expanded street resurfacing program contracts 1 and 2. The first contract is on tonight's agenda. It's typically about $2 million. Council's been successful in obtaining gaming funds. These are funded through the gaming fund program. And there's also projects for HMA pavement scarification and resurfacing. This is where the contractors and our city crews work hand in hand to resurface city streets. And the list of all those streets are contained in that yellow handout that you have. I'll kind of go through some of these quickly. There's a recently completed 11th and Euclid signal project, which I know Councilman Mahaffey's familiar with. There will be coming up to be bid later this summer, a project in Euclid Avenue at Cornell and Oxford for about $1.3 million. It's primarily a traffic safety, but there will be some elements of the Highland streetscape that will be built. Part of that, some of the sidewalk and lighting, primarily so that when that project, the streetscape project goes, we won't have to redo things that we need to do with this project. Another safety improvement project, 7th and Laurel. That's there will help address some of the traffic and pedestrian issues associated with DMAC and Mercy. The bids for this will actually be open tomorrow, and then the contract will be presented to council at the next council meeting. We have East 14th and East Euclid Avenue improvements. This has safety funds in it. It's a project in which we have a number of accidents where people run into that signal pole, and we want to move that back so that our pole doesn't get damaged, and also so that people aren't injured or have personal property damage from running into that pole. Beaver Avenue, Aurora Avenue. This is really a project that was done in conjunctions with the Beaver Avenue widening project. It's about 75% complete. Will be finished up this summer. And then a project that's going to be in front of council tonight for consideration, our downtown bicycle plan project. That's the DOT process, bid process, but it'll be for council for consideration of award. I know there's been some questions about how much of that project can be done before RAGBRAI. Only a portion of it can be done. We are unable to talk to the contractor yet due to DOT rules. We have to wait until your action tonight, in which case then we can talk to them about scheduling and how much we can or cannot get done before RAGBRAI. Bridges, which is where we kind of started our presentation. This is a picture of 6th Avenue of Des Moines, a bridge that was rehabilitated last summer. So I can show a completed project, which is good. On our bridge projects, it's really a continuum. We are constantly going through inspections and then programming, and typically we're going to be working on 1 or 2 major bridges every year. Since the city of Des Moines is built on 2 rivers, we have a number of bridges. It's a large part of our capital program, and we have to keep focused on it because you really cannot get behind on your bridge maintenance improvement program. Grand Avenue over Walnut Creek, Councilmember Hensley mentioned. This particular project's $3.3 million project was started this spring. It is a complete tear out and rebuild of the bridge. We have been working very closely on the detours. The police department has been great on the enforcement actions. We've been out there writing tickets to those individuals who feel that the speed limit's just advisory. I think that's been effective. We've been measuring the speeds. The speeds have been staying down. We don't see the speeding through that area. So our enforcement education programs have been effective. It is very disruptive to the local citizens, even though traffic's trying to find other routes. There are some non-official detours which we want to kind of try to discourage. And tonight there is a change order in front of council. Earlier this year on that project, there was some asbestos found in some caulking underneath a railing, which was quite a surprise to us. You know, I guess years ago, people were concerned about a concrete bridge burning down over water, but I don't know why it was in there. But we did deal with it in accordance with the appropriate regulations. That has been removed. In addition, there was some waterproofing on some of the concrete inside the arch, which we found that waterproofing will require some of the concrete rubble to be disposed of in a landfill. It's not really a hazard, but we do need to dispose of it in a landfill versus a construction landfill, so that's some additional costs associated with that. I think the important thing is that the opening date for that had to be extended to September 27th, and that's probably the biggest action in front of council on that change orders is reestablishing that date to account for those environmental and regulatory issues that were not in the original contract. I think it's important for us to get that date established now in the contract so that when we get closer to that, we can keep everyone focused on the goal, which is to get this bridge open.
What was the date?
It was like 2 weeks before that, or 10 days, so.
Now, Jeb, you and I have talked about this. The businesses down there, there are a couple of businesses that are being impacted tremendously. I mean, their sales, you know, they shared some numbers with me that what they were a year ago compared to what they are today, and it's half. Especially if it's not a destination business. McDonald's is a prime example. Because you can go to McDonald's any place else in the city and get the very same product. But it is really having very, very significant impacts on businesses like I never imagined.
Right. That's sort of the bad news story. And then I think on the good news, some of the businesses which tend to be destination businesses, people are finding them. You know, it's like when you're going to that, McDonald's unfortunately is, if you went to one McDonald's, you're just as satisfied as going to another McDonald's, since that's sort of their business plan, is that there's uniformity across all their restaurants. And so the drive-by traffic is very important to those business types. You know, it's very difficult for us. That happens in many construction projects. I mean, the flip side, I think it shows the importance of keeping our bridges and roads intact, because when they aren't in place, it impacts our whole economic way of life. And I think it's important for us as a community and as a state to keep funding available for road improvements, because it does make a difference for businesses. We've tried to think of ideas that could, we can't have, you want people to take appropriate detour routes so that we don't impact the neighborhoods. Also, we want people to visit those businesses. We would encourage anybody that's uses that McDonald's before, that they would continue to be patrons there and try to help us through that situation. But I think the goal is to get this done as quickly as possible. The high water events this spring have had impacts on us. I mean, that Walnut Creek will jump on you 7-8 feet in just a matter of hours, and that can create havoc. As we get a little further and get out of the water, won't be as susceptible to the flooding situation. But we do have penalties in the contract to keep the contractor motivated. If he does not make those dates, they will be assessed financial liquidated damages. That's why it's important for us to reestablish that date now in the contract. Maybe a little better news, the Easter Lake Drive over Easter Lake, we started that project this year, and it's open to traffic. It was not a complete rebuild, so that did help us there. There's still additional work to be done. That bridge work was staged in between the work on Indianola, so it's to be completed this year, and next year we'll have parts of Indianola Drive down, and this kind of works in with the local traffic. Just a little bit of commercial break here. We do have on the website a road closure, street closure map. You can get to that at DM or www.dmgov.org. If you look over on the left-hand side, there's a quick link. It says road closures. You click on that, and they'll have a list of road closures. And then you can also, when you're on that page, also on the right-hand side, you can do closure maps. If you click on that, this map will come up, which will show closures throughout the city. After the time, I'll probably try to speed this up. This is a picture of some work that's been completed in Lower Union Park sewer. Dave did a good job of explaining some of the sewer improvements that we've done. He had already talked about the lining, how that's important to help reduce the flows down to the plant, and also does help prevent basement backups. Our 2013 program hasn't come out. I think what's important to notice is that in the previous two programs, we were able to get grant money. That will not be available for the 2013 program, but we will be doing one with our enterprise funds. We typically have a number of sewer repair contracts out to the city. Currently, contract 1 is being worked on. There is one of those contracts which may be of interest to Councilman Myers at the Driftwood Avenue area. It's in Three Lakes Estate. It's a sewer that was damaged by a landslide a few years ago, and we're going in there and repairing that and rerouting the storm sewer. As far as types of contracts, so we are installing new sanitary sewer. There are places in town which don't have sanitary sewer. When they came into the city of Des Moines, there's one on Wakanda Parkway. These projects come in as petitions from the neighbors. It's nearing completion. Another one that's just starting is at East 37th and Hubble, and that should be bid here shortly in July. Pump station work was mentioned in the previous presentations, Southeast 4th and Shaw. Currently, that requires crews to do pumping. We have programmed to install another pump station. It's just a continuum of our process of improving our flood protection. And not only in new pump stations, there's a current contract out for pump station modifications at Southeast 19th and Harriet to make those current pump stations maintainable and more robust in their operation. Spend a little time, another category of projects that the city does in their capital improvements is parks projects. This is a recently completed water feature up at McHenry Park, which happens to look over the Birdland levee, I guess all things are related, then we are doing this summer work, additional work in McHenry Park Shelter construction. That's part of Parks master planning for that area. Cheatham Park basketball courts. There is a project, Greenwood, which is on tonight's agenda for council consideration to award, which is to repair some of the detention ponds and help that pond have, be better water quality in the Greenwood Park pond. That's on tonight's agenda. And just a record of note, last year we did quite a bit of trail work, Des Moines Regional Trail, John Pat Dorian and Grays Lake Connector Trail. That represents about $2 million in those 3 projects of new trail work. Not only do we have new projects in the park system, but we do need to go back and operation and maintenance. Tonight, its consideration for award is a contract for Park 88 parking lot improvements. As you remember, Project Civic Access identified a number of improvements that the city needed to do to improve our ADA access. This is part of that project and part of that Civic Access project. In addition, project was awarded for Botanical Center accessible elevator. That project was part of a previous agreement. Work is underway. A lot of the work that you see happening down at the Botanical Center is not city work. It's really privately funded work, but we do have this one little piece down there, just to make you aware of that. Kind of speeding up on sidewalks. I think what's instructive here is that while we still continue to have our traditional sidewalk construction programs, due to Project Civic Access, we've had a significant increase in what's required for us to do on a ramp project. 3 programs, we've got about $1.2 million. Those were on the fiscal year, which we're about ready to run out. As soon as we enter into the new fiscal year, we'll be bringing additional ramp projects forward of about similar scope in order to be compliant with that program. We do also have high priority sidewalk. Those are non-assessed. We do have assessed programs which vary year to year depending on the petitions from the citizens, and there will be another high priority program again once we enter into our new fiscal year and funds are made available. Municipal facilities, it's picture Fire Station 1. That's the most recent facility dedicated. The mayor presided over that ceremony just recently. I think it's important to know that we really set a watershed year, probably unprecedented in city history, the number of facilities that have been completed last year. Bright Grandview Clubhouse, Fire Administration Training Facility, Fire Station 1. Those facilities, there were also private funds available, grant funds that helped us construct those. We do have our general maintenance program awarded this summer. Parking garage repair at 3rd and Court, 9th and Locust is essentially maintenance type work. These type of projects are funded out of the parking enterprise system. Police evidence, the bids will be opened tomorrow on the police evidence storage facility, and the results of that bid opening will be presented to council at their June 24th council meeting for your consideration. Just some general municipal improvements later this year, some HVAC improvements in the library system, and of course, the biggest project, municipal facility project this summer will be the MSC, which has already been awarded by City Council to Newman Brothers, a firm here from Des Moines. So that sort of concludes a brief overview. Again, you do have the 2 documents. If there's additional information about any particular project, or if you want a different one included in that handout, let us know. We can update the next time we publish that.
Yep, thank you very much.
A lot going on. Thank you.
Let's quickly move to our next presentation with Parks and Recreation with an overview of the summer programs, construction, and park improvements. And
we'll be brief.
let's make it as quick as possible. Thanks.
Good morning, Mayor, County, members of the Des Moines City Council. I'm Ben Page, Director of Parks and Recreation. I'm going to kind of skip a couple slides just because we're short on time, unless you'd like me to go through those. But we had a video that we're showing. I will play that for you some other time. We've developed a promotional video that's being played at Principal Park on their big screen, as well as our neighborhood movie program on Channel 7, so maybe you'll catch it there. But it talks about all the great happenings and showcasing all the great services that the city of Des Moines has for parks and recreation services. One of our first events is actually starting June 6th. It did start Thursday nights at Grays Lake Social Dancing. This is new for us. It's a great free program. It ranges from line dancing to swing dancing. As it continues to grow in popularity, we may add some more dancing, some kind of celebrity focus like dancing with the city attorney. Christine, if you wait. Also, yoga in the park. Backed by popular demand, we do yoga in the park. It's not uncommon to see up to 300 people every Saturday morning at Grays Lake. And just a quick heads up, we hope to open Grays Lake up this week, maybe even tomorrow if it all works well. Again, admission is free, and new this year as part of that program, if you come a little bit earlier at 8:15, we've got a Zumba in the park, which is an exercise form based to music. Also, we do the very popular Free Flicks program. We have this giant inflatable movie screen we take out to the neighborhoods, and we use this to actually have positive programming in our neighborhoods. We do a movie with the neighborhoods. They come in, they sell the concessions, so a little fundraiser for them. They get to pick the movie, and we have some positive elements in the parks. New this year, with Councilmember Moore, we've come up with a great program. We're going to do a drive-in movie at County Soccer. We're working with all the local classic car groups to bring all their cars in so the general public can come out, look at the cars before the sunset hits. We'll play American Graffiti that evening. And if you're looking for a list for all the other movies, what times, location, and dates, go to dmparks.org. You'll have a full listing of all of our movies. We just finished up on back-to-back weekends with the boys, and for the first time ever, the girls' Iowa High School Championships at County Soccer. It was a great event. The tournament organizers were very impressed with the atmosphere of Des Moines. But we even have a bigger one that will put that one, there's no comparison to those two combined. It's actually the Youth Soccer Regional 2 Championships, June 22nd through the 26th. It's going to expect to draw 3,500 players from 14 states and 12,000 spectators. Again, it's not uncommon that hotels will be full in the greater Des Moines area all the way up to Ames and Newton. We generally always get some great comments from the restaurant owners as well. They always tell us, please keep doing these programs. It's our best day, our best week, and our best month each time you bring this large event to town. So there's a tremendous amount of economic impact in that facility. Another thing we created last year was our first ever National Park and Recreation Month, and we're bringing it back this year. And the reason we do this is when we go out to the neighborhoods or we go out to talk to constituents, we always find out they said, we didn't know you did all this. So we created a little bit of a carnival atmosphere on the bridge during the farmers market to showcase all of our services from cemeteries to parks to aquatics to trails and so forth. And we also bring some of our partners, the Blank Park Zoo, the Iowa Cubs, and the Botanical Gardens. So come on out and get a little bit of a taste of what we do and how we offer some things. I wanted to just remind you this past winter and thank you for your support. We had our first ever online registration software for the City of Des Moines Parks Department, and we're very proud of this. We did some training over the last few months. We unveiled our very first program, swimming lessons, and I'll just take you through the bottom stat. It's really impressive to me is that for the first program, we had 91% register online versus 9%. So as we unveil new programs each month and each week, we're going to have an online presence as well as a front desk presence. So it's a great investment that the community wants more of, as you can see. Last summer, we spent a lot of time out in the pools talking to the pool patrons and asking them what we could do to increase attendance and increase maybe even revenue at our pools. One such proposal that was uniform across all 5 pools was do a family swim night. Come out where it's just restricted to only families. So we're going to take their advice and do that. We're going to go out at each pool, and for $5, no matter what size your family is, you can get in. It's going to be restricted to only families. That means you have to come with either one parent, a guardian, or a grandparent to get in, and it'll only be for families. And that schedule will be online as well. Also, since we have 3 wonderful dog parks now in our system, we're going to engage the Animal Rescue League and have some great programming in our parks. This is called Bark in the Park. We'll be doing 2 events out there. We'll be doing obedience training and tips, as well as how to better communicate with your pets. I have a little thing I can pass around. Might be a little heavy to pass around. This is our newest playground piece here, if you want to pass them on. Look at this. This is called the Imagination Playground. It's a great prop. What it is there's a lot of scientific research out there right now that kids have too much structured play and they're actually losing their ability to use their imagination. So last winter we bought this and put it into the community centers. The kids absolutely love it. There's 1,000 pieces, as you can see in the picture, and they can build whatever their mind can come up with. We unveiled it last winter, very popular, so we said, let's take it out to the parks this summer. We're going to take this out to the parks that have wading pools and program this, let the kids try it out in the parks.
So is there one for each park?
Oh, we have one set, and we'll move it around to each.
Okay.
So, also, I want to remind you, even though it's summertime, the community center operations does not stop. We have two great community centers, Robert L. Scott 4 Mile Community Center and Pioneer Columbus. Both open 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and very affordable, as you can see. Free for seniors and free for youth under 18, or $1 per day if you're not in those classifications. Also, just a little quick sampling. They continue to have senior meal sites there. We have taekwondo, table tennis, just general walking and exercise opportunities, pickleball, the list goes on and on. These are just a few, so don't forget about those great community centers during the summer. And as Jeb pointed out, my points will be brief on these next ones. There's some new facilities coming online. This is a very economical and sustainable way to get park improvements when it comes to wading pools. The old wading pools take water and it takes state requirements for staffing. These new facilities are better for the public and more economically feasible for the city because I can turn them on sooner when the staff's not here yet, and they can stay on longer in the season because a lot of times our staff is only here from Memorial Day to Labor Day, but the weather's warmer outside of those two bookends. So it's a great way to make sure our park spaces are activated longer in the season. You recently took action, and we thank you for that, to rename the Berlin Shelter the Ding Darling Shelter. It opened this past weekend, and it had a wedding and a large family gathering here. This work progress administration facility from the 30s has been beautifully restored. Now it has heating and air conditioning, full service kitchen and restrooms. It is our largest enclosed shelter, so I hope you'll get out and have a chance to use it. And for those listening, put it on your short list to rent. Also, the watercraft rental at Grays Lake is a very popular program, but we have never had a way to serve those with disabilities. So the Friends of Des Moines Parks took us on their own behalf and raised $15,000 in a short time and put this in. And we open Grays Lake later this week. We'll be now programming our watercraft rental for the first time for the folks that have disabilities. Also mentioned in Jeb's report is Good Park. This picture was taken last week. This is the new shelter in the background, and it'll be a wading pool like you saw in the previous, or a splash pad, excuse me, like you saw in the previous slides. And the new Des Moines River Trail that goes from James County Youth Baseball Complex down to Principal Park. This wonderful facility should come online officially later in July, is what the engineers tell us. So we'll have a nice event for that. And just quickly, we have a new shelter being built at McHenry on the Overlook Terrace where the tennis court used to be. We have 2 miles of nature trails. Something important for the council to know that we continually survey the public about capital improvements in the parks. And their number 1 and number 2 things they always rate, number 1 and 2, is paved trails and nature trails. And then also, Memorial Dog Park will come online here the week of June 17th. And we had a great dedication yesterday. I know this is past data, but I think it's great for us to point out that we had a nice Woodland Cemetery Arts dedication. We honored Gerald LeBlanc on Saturday, and we had a great attendance from the council. Thank you for coming out. I know he was very excited, and it was great for us to do. He's done so much for our cemeteries, and we can honestly say that without Gerald's work, our cemeteries wouldn't be as beautiful as they are today. Also, we're going to have some more dedications, as you see here, for the new shelter at Birdland and the Easy Launch Canoe Access at Grays Lake and these other facilities. We'll be getting with you on your calendars to hopefully get you out to those too. That was rather quick.
Very good. Any questions, anybody? Seeing none, why don't we open it up for public comment? Is there anybody in the audience who would like to make a comment? Get any clarifications? Seeing none, I want to thank you all for attending today, and for those of you who just haven't had enough, we'll see you tonight.